My name is Larry VanWagner. I was born in Poughkeepsie, New York, at Vassar Brothers Hospital. Lived in Hyde Park for all of my youth until I left for college, which was Springfield College in Massachusetts. And a year out from my graduate year at Springfield, I came back to Poughkeepsie and started working at Marist College in 1976.
Larry VanWagner, former head coach of the swimming and diving team at Marist, began swimming as a teenager. As he called it, he was a late bloomer to the sport that was rare for kids and teens to pick up in the Dutchess County community.
We were considered, Dutchess County itself was, someone once said it was a dry county. And what they meant was that there were no pools in Dutchess County. There were a couple outdoor pools. There was only one indoor pool, and that was the Poughkeepsie YMCA at the time, which was decades old, a very old facility that was built below ground. And that was a unique experience, but that's where I started primarily with indoor, being able to swim during the winter months in the Hudson Valley area. And I didn't start until I was about 15, 16 years of age. So I was a late starter because without having the opportunity to swim, either in elementary or middle or high school, I had to choose other sports, which I did, and participated in a multitude of sports before I was able to start with swimming. And the YMCA had just completed a new facility in Poughkeepsie in 1968. So that helped not just myself, but many age group swimmers in the area who were looking for a pool in which to practice and compete in.
Following his passion for swimming, VanWagner attended Springfield College to swim. His experiences there eventually led him to Marist College to coach the swimming and diving team, which he really started from the ground up. His role at Marist would turn into an illustrious 45-year career that would make him the longest tenured coach in Marist College history.
The college experience was tremendous because two things that I was looking for when selecting a school to go to. And that one was physical education. And at the time, Springfield was identified as one of the top PE schools in the world. And I was looking for a great college swimming experience too. And the coach at the time, who had already been there for just about 40 years, was a Olympic coach and a legend in the sport, known worldwide. So those two factors led me to Springfield. I had a lot of different experiences at Marist because when I first got there, the facility, the McCann Center, was still being built. So I had to wait another 12 months before I really had a pool. When I first arrived on campus, it was just a hole in the ground, and had to wait 12 months for the completion of the McCann Center before we could start up a program. And at the time, we had no recruits, obviously, nobody on campus that had much experience in terms of competitive swimming. So we started out with a club program, which involved both men and women. And that's kind of unique to have a co-ed program on a college level. So we competed for the first, I think it was 5 years as a co-ed, starting off as a club and then graduating to a varsity sport. And it wasn't until 1983 when we finally were able to separate men from the women and create two different varsity programs, which was ideal, obviously, for the women athletes. It was really very unfair for them to have to compete against men in a men's conference those first few years. But the women that we had were tremendously competitive and had a real positive experience being able to compete with the men at that time. And so that's when we separated the two programs. We were competing in the Metropolitan Swimming and Diving Conference, which was a conference specific to that sport. And it wasn't until 1996 that the school entered the MAC conference as a whole to participate in multiple sports. But the advantage that swimming and diving had is that we were not participating in the conference that the school was affiliated with at the time. So when the school decided to join the MAC, we were one of only two sports that could start off competing immediately. The other sports had to wait for a year to transition from one conference to the other. So that was a unique experience, and we were able at that time, the men in particular were able to win the first MAC conference championship in swimming and diving.
While VanWagner's own kids did not partake in swimming, he has mentored hundreds of swimmers over his career, and as a result saw the growth of Marist's athletic department as the emergence of Title IX gave female swimmers more opportunities, and the changing conference gave players at Marist more opportunities to compete. The success of VanWagner's program was evident as he captured 14 conference championships, including the MAC title in the school's first 10 years of competition in the league. The Marist women's squad had captured 22 conference championships, 18 MAC, 2 Metro, and 2 Eastern Collegiate Athletic Conference wins. His squads have combined for 30 MAC conference championships since joining the conference in 1996.
I tried to start my own children. I have 3 boys. We tried to start our own children in competitive swimming, which we did at a young age, at about 6, 7, or 8 years of age. But they all opted to leave the sport at around 12 or 13. We gave them the option, and they all left, which was really depressing for me because they had 2 parents who were college swimmers, both All-Americans, and they never realized their potential in that sport. But anyway, they went on to bigger and better things at the time. And then 45 was just a round number. That's why I picked it. I was 70 at the time, and I knew that no one previously at Marist College and at most schools had ever coached the same sport for that length of time at one institution. What we've seen over the last few decades is that coaches move quite often from one school to another. But Marist grew tremendously since I first started back in 1976, when it was more or less a commuter school with about 1,500, 1,600 students. And many of them, as I said, commuted to Marist during the daytime. They were all local. Most of them were New York State, Connecticut, some from Massachusetts and New Jersey. So it was a very small private institution at that time, struggling, I would say, like our sport, struggling to be competitive in whatever conference we happened to be affiliated with. But then the college grew. Dr. Murray came in 1980 as president, and he had a tremendous foresight to grow the college, which it did. It tripled in size, facilities tripled, and the athletic department just continued to grow and grow and grow. We started off with 10 varsity sports, and I think we finally got up to 24 varsity sports by the time we got into the MAC conference. And I just found that the growth of our program, the swimming and diving program, paralleled the growth of the college. And so I think that maintained my interest and motivated me to continue and not move on, which I did have an opportunity to do, to move on to another institution. But I saw the growth in Marist College and the growth in my own programs.
For VanWagner, he understands the value of studying sports history today. He wants the legacy of his swimmers and his program to live on. For kids today, whether they want to become swimmers or not, he wants kids to stay active and realize that while they may not become the next Michael Phelps or Michael Jordan, you can still find potential and success in playing sports.
Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of education in the history of any sport, in athletics in general, on any level. And I think, thankfully, people like you are helping to preserve that history, which I feel is extremely important. Because regardless, again, of how successful a coach or an athlete is at any point in time, whatever they've gone through and whatever they've experienced, whatever they've learned has been done before. For example, the coach, the mentor that I was privileged to have come in contact with in my life when I was competing in college, had history back from the early part of the 20th century. And I learned a tremendous amount of information from him and his experiences in the sport that helped me become a better coach, I believe. I think when you watch sports today and you hear of sports today, they really focused on the top tier, even in swimming and diving. We talk about our Olympic team members primarily every 4 years, but that's pretty much who we all focus on. And what I would say to young children, whatever sport they attempt to start with, is that they all have potential. We don't all rise in swimming and diving. We don't all rise to the levels of the Michael Phelpses of the world. In fact, the vast majority of us don't ever get to that level of competition in their sport. But everyone has potential to be successful on some level. And in particular, in the college, there was a point in time where when I went to college in the early 70s, women, for example, didn't really have the same much opportunities as men did. And at that time, our Olympic teams were made up of primarily 14 to 16-year-old young ladies, primarily because they didn't have the opportunities. And then when Title IX came into effect, it actually affected my own wife, who was attending college and competing in the mid-70s. It affected her opportunities. And suddenly we found in the next decade or two that the average age of the Olympic female swimmer went from 14, 16 all the way up to 21. And now it's gone beyond 21 because of the opportunities in the sport after college. And I think that says a great deal. Our sport has grown because of those opportunities provided by Title IX back in the middle 70s. But I think if young children focus too much again on the Michael Jordans or the Michael Phelpses of the world, you could lose interest and focus. And what I want them to understand is that they all possess potential, and to realize their potential in a sport, I think, is one of the greatest experiences that one can have in life.